perpetrators are driven by two very powerful combined forces. One of them is a sense of entitlement, and the other is a word which is probably a bit old-fashioned, but I call it lust.
Right.
And when you combine those two together, there is very little that limits those the energies they provide for a guy. So there's
Can you elaborate on lust for?
Well, essentially, what a man is looking for when he meets a partner is he's looking for a sexual partner. I mean, he's not looking for somebody to make his bed or to make his dinner or to do anything else. Essentially, what he's looking for initially is a sexual partner. When and if that lust in some way is to be modified, the sense of entitlement that he has doesn't allow him to modify that sense of lust. So his sexual desires and his sexual motivation become the driving force for everything that he does.
Well, as a therapist, I always like to hold the belief that anyone can change if they choose to. But the difficulty is that in my experience, most violent, abusive men are really in denial. And in order for someone like that to change, they would really have to take responsibility for their actions and their attitudes.
So, I mean, in layman's terms, what I'm saying is a bad person that can somehow redeem himself, go to Damascus sort of, go back into society, get a new partner, and don't hit her.
Yeah, that's possible, yes. I live in hope.
We have had 3 women coming through our service who have been abused by the same man. So obviously, you know, the pattern of abuse just continued.
We also know that while there are some perpetrator programs that, unless those are tied into the judicial system with sanctions, statistics demonstrate that they're not really successful. And I think it's about society also changing and society taking on a responsibility.
I mean, I'd be confused with how they actually, how would they change the ways they do anger management? Or?
Well, firstly, they would have to go to their doctor who would refer them then to anger management, and there's a programme that was done in Cork, but I'm not sure now of how that worked. They worked with probation services and that was like court mandated that they had to go through a programme, but what you were finding was a lot of the men were just doing it so that they wouldn't be sent to jail.
Is a male perspective a valuable asset in dealing with the social problem? Because you're the first man that's going to do this.
Yeah, I think it is...
Am I right in saying that? There are a lot of people, like, there's Women's Aid, there's other services. It seems to be either all women or mostly women. I may be wrong.
No, you're very right, Gerard, in the sense that I'm probably one of the few men who actually have engaged in this issue in Ireland over the last 15 or 20 years constantly. I mean, some of my people think I'm a bit...
Do you think it makes a valuable difference?
Well, what I have found is that because I've had the time and the privilege to sit back and try and examine what's happening from a perspective of, I suppose, a male perspective, and probably my previous existence as car salesman allowed me to actually identify the ability of these abusers to con everybody, because I was a con man myself, so a male con man would have an advantage over anybody else. So even my colleagues who have lived sheltered lives in the academic world would say, Don, that can't be right, and I'd say, I'm telling you it is right. I know I work with them, I was one of them, and that kind of thing. So the idea that there are people out there who can actually manipulate the world around them and who can con very intelligent people, either the police, the judges, the solicitors, or anybody else, into believing their story. I mean, I know that to be true.
In your training awareness program, reference is made to a cycle of violence. Can you elaborate further on this?
Well, there is a lot of different stages in the abusive relationship. What you find is there could be, the cycle of abuse would be, it just starts with maybe verbal abuse. Maybe before a person even gets married, there would be the signs where they would say don't go out with your friends, you know, why can't you just stay with me, and you know, sure, we really love each other and we want to spend time together. So obviously she's in love with this person, she thinks it's great, he really cares about her, but really what he's doing is isolating her from her friends and getting that control, because really what domestic violence is about controlling one person over the other. Then after the rows, or if there's physical abuse, he's sorry and he comes back and there's flowers and it's never going to happen again, and he goes back and maybe that lasts for a few months, maybe 6 months, and then the cycle starts again. We had one woman who he only hit her once, which was once too often, but she went to her doctor and told her doctor, and she told her husband that. But after that, the psychological, the emotional, all escalated, which was harder to deal with, because she said at least when you got a slap, you knew it was over at that. So it's the emotional, the psychological, which is the most damaging. And as I said before, it's harder for people to understand.
Is domestic abuse more common in one specific social class or ethnic background than another?
No, definitely not. In my experience, it affects all classes, and at times some of the men who are violent and abusive in the home, they may be seen as pillars of their community or really fun people out in the bar or within their community. And we know from high profile cases that an abuser can be a judge, there can be a doctor.
Why are some men inclined to horribly abuse their partners? Is there any key thing that differentiates them from non-violent partners? Oh.
Yeah, I suppose going back to some of the words that I used earlier on, it's
is it something in their upbringing?
No.
Not necessarily.
No. Going to use
what makes the difference? What's the difference between me? I'm not a violent person,
okay,
and someone who is.
There's a very fundamental question for all of us men and for all women as well. It is the struggle between good and evil within us all.
Right.
So, I mean, we're born with that struggle. It's not something that we arrive at a later time. That comes with the package, if you like, when we're born. And subsequent to that, some of us men have a sense of entitlement which actually expands as we grow older. Now, I'm not saying that's because we're allowed to expand it, or maybe even with the best education and upbringing, we may still arrive into the young adult state with this sense of entitlement for ourselves. So where it comes from, I'm never sure, or it may come from a combination of different experiences as young men grow up.
So you haven't seen a pattern, you haven't seen a thing it's in their background, they're from a broken home, it's society, it's something psychologically wrong. There is no easy...
No, there's nothing wrong with them. I mean, these people are very capable, clever people, and in all of the stratas of their work life.
It's just a moral thing.
It is a moral dilemma, really, and it is to do with having a poor sense of responsibility for their own actions and a sense of entitlement which dismisses their responsibility about the hurt they might cause somebody else.
Well, some research has shown that men who come through abusive families themselves go on to abuse, but then we've had a lot of people as well saying that they weren't in an abusive situation. So really it's about the person themselves, and it's about their actual need for control over another person. So to me, in my own personal opinion, I would feel it's something lacking in that person, because at the end of the day they don't go down to the pub and hit the person sitting next to them or anything like that. They wait until they come home, until it's behind closed doors. And what we have to realise as well, that a lot of this abuse, the men are really nice to other people. They're maybe in jobs where they help women in these situations, and they're actually, abusers themselves.
Alcohol gets blamed a lot and mentioned a lot, is that?
Alcohol...
Does that cut it with you?
Not really, no. There's a lot of men who don't drink, pillars of the community. Alcohol would maybe escalate it a bit, but it's certainly not the cause.